So you have like this overlap of energies or timelines that are happening with you right now. You're overlapping on some timelines that are from previous lifetimes. And then you also are folding over in timelines for other people.
Everything that you're describing is my experience in this life as well. And I find that it's been difficult to navigate that ability to have that connection with all of these things.
Welcome to the Akashic Recordings. I'm Annette and Akashic conduit, channel, and spiritual guidance coach.
And I'm Julia Nalivaiko, storyteller and creative producer of conscious media content, such as this podcast. What you're about to hear is a real-life Akashic Records session with Annette and one of her clients, recorded with their permission. For privacy, their names have been changed, but everything else is real.
Stay tuned to the end of each episode, where we deep dive into subjects that come up throughout the session.
Today's session is with April, who's going through a transition period in her life and has come to Annette to seek some clarity about how she's been feeling.
All right, so what would you like to cover today?
Really needing clarity around intimate relationships, my soul's purpose, just feeling like I'm entering a new chapter, a new level of being. Like in a video game, when you get to a new level, you die 100 times before you figure out how to use the tool. And so I feel like I'm in that space of messing up a lot, but in a new level.
We can definitely ask the guides where we need to go first. And when it comes to your relationship life at the moment, where are you exactly?
I went through a divorce last year, and that is finalized. And now I got online and started doing some dating and have been talking to men here and there. But I find that I get swept up in that desire to have a partner, and it can railroad my other workings, like professional life and my balance, basically.
Okay. All right, cool. So we can take a look at that, definitely. We are opening up the Akashic Records. Thank you to Akula, my Akashic guide, for being here. Thank you to Archangel Metatron and Archangel Sandalphon for being here as well and allowing us access to the Akashic Records. So of the situations that we were looking at in her transition, her soul purpose, what is going on in her relationship connection life, where do we need to go first? We're going to go to soul purpose. I think this is going to help you with understanding a little bit more about what you need to do moving forward. Okay. How many lifetimes do we need to look at? Just one. Okay. So the first thing that I'm seeing is that you are some sort of priestess. This is a more ancient lifetime. You see the magic in what people would consider to be the everyday and mundane. You see the little spark and that little sparkle in each and every living thing. You're absolutely fearless. And a lot of times people look at fearlessness as being something like fierce, somebody who's not afraid to move forward and do things and take charge and in that sort of strong, divine masculine energy. And in fact, you being fearless is simply the act of having no fear. It is literally just an absence of fear. And it is because you are connected. You're connected to every single living thing. And you can feel the pain points as well. The image that they're showing me is you're walking through grass, you're barefoot, you have a robe on, and you can feel when something is dying. You can feel when something is hurt. You can feel when something is just being born and having that new energy. You're feeling that, distress. If somebody's feeling distress, like it, and it's not like you're taking it on yourself. You're imagining there's a point of light off to your right, and you can sense that point of light is in pain. And then there's a point of light off to your left, and then you can sense that point of light is aligned and in love. There's just an innate knowing of what is around you.
Can I ask a question around that?
Yeah.
Pertaining to this life, everything that you're describing is my experience in this life as well. And I find that it's been difficult to navigate that ability to have that connection with all of these things. And specifically in more intimate relationships, when I go around family members, I leave taking some of their physical ailments or mental ailments. And I'm trying to do my best to navigate not taking all of that on, but it's as if that's just my default. And I'm
Mm,
curious if there's anything that I can do or if we can clear so that I
mhm,
can better navigate. Because I do get swept up in the collective often, and I
mhm.
have to find myself again and remind myself, okay, that's not necessarily mine. And I breathe and try to ground it.
So, to answer your question, there is a distortion in how you show up with these points of light. So, this original lifetime we're looking at for your soul's purpose, you were in complete alignment and you were not involved in that point of light that, let's say, was in the process of dying. You were not interfering. You were not trying to make that point of light feel better. You were not doing anything. You were simply observing. Okay, so let's see what else they want to show us for that particular lifetime. It's almost as if you're here to record experiences. And they're saying, yes, you're here to observe, you're here to record, you're here to see how energies respond to different experiences, stimuli, whatever it happens to be. And your job as a soul has been to find improvements on those things. Now, it's not to fix whatever happens to be wrong. It just simply means that you see what is going on, you see the reactions or the results of what happens, and then you find a better way of going about whatever it is. So they're showing me you're observing in this ancient lifetime, you're observing a family going through the grieving process. They had lost their grandmother, and you're watching them go through the grieving process, and you're starting to observe how much the energy just sort of curls off their bodies, that feeling of grief and what it does to them and what it does to their hearts and their energy fields. And you start to understand there are people who are staying stuck that aren't grieving. There are people who are grieving and moving through the energy, and they will become sort of healthy on the other side because they've moved through the energy. And then there are other people who get stuck in that energy, stuck in the grieving. So you're seeing how each person deals with this death in a different way, and how it affects the body, how it affects the soul, how it affects the person as they move through the rest of their life. Part of this information that you're gathering and that you have been gathering for your entire soul's existence has been because it helps as humanity evolves. It helps the souls on the other side when they're making their soul plan to choose situations that are going to help them with the lessons or the objectives that they are here to accomplish. Because the earth has evolved so much over the course of the billions of years, there are a lot of things that are different now than they were back when this lifetime was that we're looking at now. So, how somebody might process grief or go through grief might be different then than it is now. We have different tools, we have different ways of moving through it depending on what culture you're in, depending on where you are on the planet, depending on all kinds of things. And so this is something that you're doing on a soul level. So you are making these observations, you're recording them in your own Akashic records, and that information gets disseminated into universal knowledge. I am seeing that when you're on the other side, when you're not incarnated as human, this is actually part of your job. You do help people come up with a soul plan based on the information that you glean from your experiences here on earth. And that is one of your only purposes here on earth, is to do that, is to observe and have those experiences, and then be able to then guide people into the best way that they can fulfill their life purpose in a particular lifetime. You have a hard time though with the wild cards. So you have a hard time with, let's say, unexpected things that happen in a person's life or unexpected decisions that they make. You very much are a soul that you tell somebody that, okay, so if you want this particular outcome, this is your best option of a soul plan. And so you help them and you work with them to create a soul plan that is optimal for them. And then you observe also from the other side and you're seeing a person deviate from that soul plan. It's like what it's like watching a car wreck. You're just like, God, come on, no, why are you doing that? No, that's not what we talked about. Like
I have that issue here too. Follow my advice, please. It'll go better.
exactly. You're watching from the other side and you're still observing and you're still learning from that based on their own experiences and why they've made the decisions that they have if they're veering from their life path. You also help people put like fail safes in place. So if let's say they're just mucking it all up and they're not doing a great job, what can happen in order to like push them back on their path, those types of things. It's a very intricate kind of job, so to speak. And you
Is
do
it-
do this for other planets as well. Like you help people when they're going to other planets and how to prepare for that. I'm sorry, you were going to ask something?
I was going to ask if this particular purpose is part of why I've had so many of my own traumatic events happen and physical, mental ailments. I feel like I've lived 100 lives in this one lifetime.
Mm. That has to do with something else. It actually does not have to do with your soul purpose specifically. There are things that you did sign up for, there are things that you didn't, but there's sort of a combination of things going on. They keep on showing me something and I'm not quite understanding what it is. It's like they're showing me it's like a folding over of the energy and I don't really understand what that means. So hold on, let me ask them what that means and why they're showing that to me. So is it folding over onto another lifetime? It is. Okay. And then it's also folding over onto other people's timelines. Okay. So if you can imagine a timeline, and let's say you have one straight line and you have 3 points on that line. If you take the middle point and pull it up so it creates like an apex or like a little mountain, okay?
Yeah.
And then imagine that those 2 points at the bottom get closer to the point where they're almost touching. So now you just have like a T shape, an upside down T shape. And then imagine that that apex is folding back over onto the line. So you have like this overlap of energies or timelines that are happening with you right now.
Mm.
So right now you're overlapping on some timelines that you have that are from previous lifetimes. And then you also are folding over in timelines for other people. And I really don't understand why that's happening, but they're going to explain that to us. Okay. What we're trying to show you and what we're trying to describe is, in fact, an overlapping of timelines. It's kind of why she is feeling like she is half in, half out of one level to the next, where that is the case from one perspective. And from another perspective, it is, in fact, two different timelines that are playing out at the exact same time.
Mm.
When you have two energies fighting and competing for a single time frame, for a single energy, it can create friction, it can create discord, it can create problems. One of the things that she has experienced in her own body has been elements of this conflict, elements of this discord between these two energies. The reason why this has happened is, in fact, because of a previous lifetime that she lived that had an effect on how the course of her timelines were to unfold. Most people's timelines unfold in a fashion where old timelines will fall away when they're meant to fall away, and then you jump into a new timeline and then you start living on that timeline. In this previous lifetime that we're going to show you, she was living two timelines simultaneously. This is not very common. This only happens very rarely. And what happened and why this is happening for her is due to her unique soul signature. Most of the time, our higher selves will branch off and go explore a certain timeline to see if it is in our highest good to go down that timeline. And then it will return back to us and then let us know that that timeline may or may not be the best timeline for us to be on, all the while still being on one timeline. In this previous lifetime, she was a man. She was somebody who was experimenting with the space-time continuum. She was trying to see if she could simultaneously live in her current world as well as a parallel world. She went into deep meditations. She did psychedelics. She tried all kinds of different modalities that she could to see if she could simultaneously live in parallel worlds, in parallel dimensions, and so on. These were experiments that she went through over and over and over again, to the point where it permanently created a discord between her current timeline and the parallel timeline. So she was living them simultaneously for the rest of that lifetime. And it created health issues because, first, it presented itself almost like schizophrenia because she didn't know which life she was living. She was living in two places simultaneously. The veil between the two places was almost completely gone for her experience. Therefore, it did make it more difficult for her to protect her energy in that lifetime, because you have a leak in your energy field between the two timelines, between the two parallel universes. So every time you tried to protect your energy, entities were able to attach to you through the veil, through the almost non-existent veil. It was something that had not been experimented with before. You were the first, and it created discord. It is from that lifetime you realized that it was not something that was necessary and, in fact, harmful for people to do. Upon the end of that lifetime, you closed the gap between the parallel universes as you were dying from that lifetime to make sure that it didn't follow you into the next lifetime. The energy of it did, in fact, follow you, and you're still transmuting that energy as of today. Okay. One of the things that I'm also hearing is that in this lifetime, in your current lifetime, it's almost as if some of the things that have happened to you, it's like it feels like it's happening to somebody else, like it shouldn't be happening to you. And that is exactly the reason why. Okay. So does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, actually. It clears up a lot of confusion. I mean, I don't know what questions to ask. I'm kind of just sitting here with it. But yeah, that feels very real.
Okay, so then I'm going to ask the guides if there's anything that we can do to help you to sort of finish transmuting that energy so you can unfold that timeline and be able to operate from a place of harmony versus this discord.
Within my body as well, because I think that's part of it is the health issues.
Okay, so they're saying there's nothing else you need to do, that the transmutation of the experience is just naturally happening. Is there anything that we can do to sort of speed that up? No, it needs to happen gradually because it was so jarring for her body, for her mind, and for her experience to begin with. The transmutation of this energy and the ability for her to sort of unfold these timelines has to be done carefully, and it has to be done in the way that is aligned for her. So she's doing everything she needs to do. There's nothing further she needs to do to make this speed up or anything else like that. She needs to pay attention to where she's having the ailments in her body, nurture those. And eventually each one of the ailments that she has will sort of subside as the unfolding process finishes. I'm getting stomach issues. I'm getting right shoulder. I'm getting hips. Okay. So it seems to be mostly in your core.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. So for your health issues, I'm starting to get that also, that they've switched various times. So it's like one thing gets healed and then something else pops up, and then one thing gets healed and something else pops up.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell me a little bit about your experience with that?
When I got out of the military, I had PTSD and herniated discs in my back. I was on fentanyl and morphine for some time, and then Valium and antidepressants and all different types of things. I was experiencing a lot of mental issues, and then I started doing yoga to relieve some of those, and that took me down a path of figuring out self-healing, learning shamanism and Ayurveda and different modalities to care for myself. And I have found that I'm able to pretty much support myself with the support of diagnoses from doctors, but also it does seem like a lot just keeps coming up again, like in my pelvic region, my low back. But I've even had 5 different bouts of skin cancer, difficulties with digestion, and then I guess I'm not clear if these are, just things that I've brought on by really pushing my body in this lifetime, or if it's in my DNA, or if it's something else. I'm not sure, but does that help?
Mm. Yeah, it does. There are certain things they're showing me were actually from this lifetime. And then there are things that were from the folding of this energy, this timeline, the discord in your timeline. The skin cancer was from the folding and the discord in this timeline. The stomach issues are tied to the processing of the PTSD, processing of the all of the different drugs that they gave you, all of those things, because sometimes when we are taking those, it can wreak havoc on our digestive system, our stomachs, things like that.
For sure.
So that's a current life situation. When it comes to the pelvic and back areas, I'm getting that those are also a current life issue. Interestingly enough, the anxiety was actually from the folding of the timelines. So the PTSD, yes, a current lifetime, but also the folding timeline. It was like compounded.
That makes sense, because when you were saying that it was presenting sort of as schizophrenia, I wouldn't say quite to that extreme, but there are times where when I feel some sort of mental ailment coming on, it's a question of like, what reality am I in right now? Where am I at? So
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense.
Yeah. And that's definitely something that is, sort of bleeding over from that previous lifetime. So one thing that you can certainly do is continue to do your meditations, your yoga. Grounding is going to be really important, protection, your bubble of protection. And then going back to the basics of what they showed us in your soul purpose, which is observe something small, like
Mhm.
observe, I don't know, a bug in a garden, observe a cat or a dog that's somewhere in your vicinity. Just observe something as like mundane as you can possibly find and connect into that energy, connect into the energy of what that is from a place of neutrality. It's understandable that that's not something that's always easily done if you're in a state of anxiety, but at the very least when you're in that state, focusing on one object or one thing can be something that can be soothing. It can be something that can help you sort of move out of that anxiety. Okay.
Mhm.
Just paying attention to the fact that I am here, I'm sitting in this spot, I am observing this snail or whatever it is, right? Even if you want to narrate it, like just actually speak the words out loud and say, I am here, I am simply observing. And that will help you align with your soul too, because that's your soul signature. That's what you're here to do. It's going to help you feel much more secure in your body, knowing that your soul is there, knowing that your soul is leading the way, essentially, with what you're here to do.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that we need to know about her soul purpose? Yes. Okay. We did touch on it briefly, which was her capability of being able to lay out these soul purposes, soul plans for people deciding to incarnate on Earth, and that she's also been doing this for other planets as well. This is an important distinction to make because she is bringing with her many years and infinite experience from other places, other worlds, other dimensions. It was part of what she was doing when she was experimenting with the folding of time. She was trying to facilitate an easier way to disseminate the information and the learning between two worlds, and realized it was something that was detrimental, and that the way that she's been doing it thus far is the most effective way, which is to gather the information, go and incarnate onto whichever planet it is she needs to incarnate on to disseminate the information to those people. She's not the only one doing this. There are many others that do this as well. You definitely try to push the envelope a little bit in terms of how things work. So if you can imagine, you have the laws of the universe, how they are operating on Earth, and then you have a slightly different laws on other planets. And what happens is you try to sort of push them to their very limits to be able to see what happens when that happens. That's also part of the reason for some of your health ailments in the past. So in past lives, is that when you push these energetic limits, it can have a detrimental effect on the human body.
Mm.
And that is also something that you're observing. Is there anything else? Not at this time. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So I know that was a lot of information. So if you do have questions later on, don't hesitate to ask, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, so then let's take a look at your relationship life and what's going on there. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so I love when the guides show me the stuff in the right order because they always do. Because what they're saying is that the reason why you're having a hard time sort of connecting to somebody else is because your energy is still diminished. You're not going to really be able to be in a romantic connection, if you will, until you're able to sort of repair that energy within yourself
Mm.
because somebody else's energy would just overtake yours, and that's exactly what you're feeling. So when you were saying like you would feel really imbalanced when you're talking to somebody else or connecting with somebody else, that's why, is because their energy is literally overtaking your own. So if you can imagine, if you're on dating apps or whatever it happens to be, and if you imagine it exactly how they showed us the soul purpose, so you're the center. There's a line that goes out to one point of light. That's one person. Maybe there's a line that goes out to another point of light. That's another person. And if you can imagine reaching out, touching that point of light and connecting with that, and then going back to your center. So that's exactly how the communication or the exchanges need to happen. It's like you go, you connect, you come back to your center. So you don't go and connect and stay in their energy.
Yeah.
You must always come back to your own energy.
And I struggle with that. I tend to go out into the astral or other plane and connect with them and want to stay there.
This is sort of a new concept. It's not something that a lot of humans practice at this time. It is an example of what they describe as non-attachment. It is not about not connecting with the other person. It is about just being in your own energy and letting them be in their own energy, and you exist together in your own energies, as opposed to being entangled in each other's energies at all times. That is where that imbalance can kind of come in. Okay. So are there any past lives that we need to look at regarding her relationship life, romantic life? Yes, there is one that we would like to bring up. This is going to help her heal some of her wounding for this lifetime. Okay. They're showing me like a little preview of the lifetime before we see it. And in this little preview, you're leaving your little base of operation, you're leaving your light, and you jump on the other light, which is this other person. And basically you kind of like go off together in that other person's light. So it's like you left your light behind and just jumped on theirs.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, your higher self is like, hey, I'm over here. Did you forget about me? So let's take a look at what happened in this particular lifetime. You always seem to be doing experiments. So this is another one of those lifetimes that you did like a little experiment. You incarnated as a woman in this particular lifetime. You were in a space that you really loved. It was a place full of nature. It was gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful place somewhere in Ireland. And I'm seeing you just enjoy your life. It was a relatively simple life, but it was gorgeous. I'm seeing you sort of by the cliffs over by the ocean, and you're taking walks and you're enjoying every day that you're living. You feel very fulfilled. You're quite on your own. I'm not seeing a lot of people around you, but you're spending a lot of time alone, and you really do enjoy it. And you meet a person in the next village over. You were quite naive as a person in this lifetime. You hadn't had a lot of experiences with a lot of people. And you meet this person in this village. You were there just getting provisions, and you met this gentleman, and he was from somewhere far off. He was traveling, and you thought that everything that he stood for was everything that you would want in life. So if you imagine, your day-to-day life of just experiencing the nature and like how beautiful it was, and you're hearing him describe all of the places that he's been, and you just think, oh my gosh, this could be so expansive for me. Like I could see like not only the beautiful place that I have lived for all these years, but then I could see all these other places in the world that could be just as beautiful or even more beautiful. So you saw it as an opportunity to essentially see the world. So you decided to leave your home. You left with this gentleman. He was quite good to you, but the problem was it wasn't him. It was the fact that you had these really grandiose expectations of how beautiful the rest of the world was going to be. And that was a really, really big disappointment. I'm seeing you on ships, and you were quite sick most of the time on this ship. You didn't like traveling by water. You loved looking at the water. You didn't like traveling by water. It didn't agree with you. You're seeing the disease on the ships as you're traveling. You're seeing more the harsher parts of humanity. And it was not anything like you expected it to be. Some of the places that you went to were not beautiful at all. They were harsh. The weather was harsh. I'm getting that maybe you went to like the northern part of Africa, and like it was sandy, and it was hot, and it wasn't beautiful. You just didn't like it. It was just not a place that you wanted to be. Part of the lesson that you needed to learn here was that first you had all of these expectations of this life that you wanted to live. And you had this sort of fairy tale view of what that was going to be. And you were more enamored with the lifestyle, or what was going to be the lifestyle, rather than the person that you were with. Because I'm really seeing like he almost had no part in any of it. It's like he was there, but like you were not necessarily connected to him. I'm not feeling a whole lot of emotion to him. You were fine with him being there. It's like you were like, yeah, I'm looking this as a new way to experience my life, and it wasn't the way that I wanted. And had you been actually in love with him, or had you actually really wanted to be with him, your experience might have been a little bit different. But because the sole reason why you went with this man was just to see the world rather than to be with him, your experience was definitely lacking.
It's funny because that's exactly my first marriage. I was not in love with my first husband. It was more of, this is what the expectations were, that I find a man to complete me and start a family and that sort of thing. It was more about the lifestyle. And that did not end well. So,
yeah. And a lot of people do that. They marry a picture or a lifestyle or whatever it is that they think society wants for them. Yeah. And instead of actually deciding or going within and asking yourself what it is you truly need or you truly want for this life, you're simply doing what everybody else does because that's what everybody does. Some people really align with that, and some people really don't. And that's where you have to really go within and decide, which person are you? Are you aligned with what you're currently doing, or are you aligned with what everybody else wants for you? And so that's going to be a really important distinction for you moving forward. So do you know what you want in a romantic connection, a divine human connection?
I'm pretty clear on it, yes.
Good. Okay. So make sure you keep that in mind when you're dating, when you're meeting people and that kind of thing, because if the person isn't aligned with that, or if it's not meshing in that way, use your intuition and don't be afraid to say, okay, you know what? This one is not for me.
I am learning that, and I recently had to step away from a budding relationship for that reason, that I listened to my intuition, even my body telling me this is not what you're aligned with, so not your partner.
So it's not to say that certain people wouldn't be able to show us certain things, like teach us certain things, and you'll know when those things are happening.
Yeah. That was the beautiful thing, is that I learned so very much because I was coming out of my second marriage, and there was a lot of things that needed to be healed. And this particular person allowed me to move through so much of that. But it got to the space where I realized, like, okay, I've learned all of that I can here, and we can't continue forward together.
Exactly. Okay. So I'm going to ask, do you have any soul contracts for romantic partners moving forward in her lifetime? She does. Okay. So is it a soul contract with one particular person? Oh, that's interesting. I'm seeing that you have 3 soul contracts, and the way that they've been written, so to speak, is that you can choose any of the 3. And once you choose one of them, then the other 2 contracts will become null and void, basically. So meaning that you have 3 opportunities or 3 different people that you could potentially connect with. And it just depends on where your life takes you and what you end up doing as to which one of them it's going to be.
Are any of them in my vicinity at this time, or is this in the future?
They're saying don't worry about where they're going to be.
Of course.
because you don't have to go to where they are. They will be where you are, wherever you decide to be.
Mm-hmm.
The universe has a really beautiful way of manufacturing things like that. You never know if you move to Colorado and then let's say the person lives where you do now.
Mm-hmm.
Miraculously, somehow that person might get a job in Colorado and they'll be moving there too. You know what I mean? Like you just don't know. You don't know how that unfolds. And that's not for us to know how it unfolds. I feel like there's a part of me, because I understand I definitely want to know those things too. And I ask those types of questions all the time. And my guides are like, you're not supposed to know. And I'm like, I know, but I want to know. They're like, no, you're not supposed to know. And I'm like, but why?
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with the fact that like, A, it can change the course of your direction if you know things. B, it can also kind of make us a little crazy if we have to know the orchestration of everything and how everything kind of comes together. Like if you imagine all of the synchronicities in your life and how things just fell into place and all of those really beautiful things in your life, they usually just happen. You don't have to force it. You don't have to orchestrate, because we have a tendency as humans to want to orchestrate. And especially you, the way that your soul operates, you're somebody who orchestrates. Like that's what you do. And so for you to not know is actually better for you to not interfere with the energy of it.
We'll pile that on the lessons of faith. I feel like a major lesson of faith at this point in my life. Trusting that I'm taken care of and all is well. And everything that I need is provided for.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that is the biggest test in faith that we all have, right? I mean, we all have that faith of like, okay, so what I want to have for my life is currently not in my reality. And I'm trusting and understanding that it is coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to be in that space consistently can be difficult. So take it sort of one moment at a time, and understanding that you can talk to your guides and say, hey, I'm having a hard time with the not knowing and not understanding what's happening and why things are happening the way that they are. Can you please give me some support? Send me some support. Send me some answers that I can know that will help me with the faith of it, right? You know, those types of things can go a long way. So oftentimes when I'm in those crises of faith, which, you know, they happen. And when that happens, maybe I'll get a sign or a synchronicity of something that has nothing to do with what I'm asking about, but it's enough to say, hey, we're here. It's clear that you know this is real. It's just not happening yet because either it's not the right time or it's not the right energy or whatever it happens to be, and that it is coming.
Yeah.
Okay. So what would you like to have the answers to moving forward?
I would like if there's any messages or specific guidance from my guides or my team. Mm-hmm. That would be helpful.
Okay. So I'm connecting in with one of your guides. One of the transitions that you're going through is going to shake your foundation. It's going to shake things up, and not from a place of change that's going to be challenging. It is going to be change that you're going to welcome, but it is going to shake the foundation of where you've been, and it's going to create a more solid foundation in the future. So allow the things that you really held on to tightly in the past to let go and fall away, because what is coming up for you is so much more expansive and will help you understand so much more your soul patterns and what you're here to do. There are times when you are afraid of letting go of things that are old or the past because you don't know what is coming. And this is a common fear for most people. Have some grace and compassion for yourself for needing to know that information, but then also the understanding that you don't need to know that information before moving forward. The changes that are going to happen are going to be rapid in succession. And when they happen, you're going to land on your feet and it's going to be super solid ground. Pay attention to the signs, pay attention to the information that we're giving you. And if there's something you're missing, we will definitely give you a heads up, and it will be loud and clear. So don't live in worry that you're missing something. If you're not seeing those signs, there's nothing to worry about. And even when you do see the signs, there's nothing to worry about. It's just us giving you a heads up that it's time to move, or it's time to go, or it's time to take action on something in particular. We understand that you have gone through some pretty traumatic things in this particular lifetime, but we want you to be assured that those times are over. Change does not necessarily need to mean trauma. Change can mean excitement. Change can mean happiness. Change can mean helping others. Change is neither good or bad. It is simply what it is. And understanding that is going to help you move through the changes. There is nothing else that we want more for you than to succeed and do what you came here to do. And you're well on your way. Do not hesitate to ask us for help. We are here for you always. Okay, thank you. How do you feel?
Well, I was just crying the whole time that I was receiving that message, so I'm a bit welled up, but I'm feeling content, trusting that all is unfolding as it needs to, and I can relax.
Okay, wonderful. So we are going to close the Akashic Records. Thank you so much to Akula, my Akashic Guide, for giving us all the information that we were able to get today. I want to thank Archangel Metatron and Archangel Sandalphon for also guiding us in the records today. Thank you. The records are closed. The records are closed. The records are closed. Thank you.
And we want to thank April for her openness to being recorded during her session. Annette, that was a mind-bending session, that was.
Indeed.
Was that a type of session that you have regularly, I wonder?
I would say semi-regularly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly getting new concepts through the guides and through the Akashic Records that basically speak to concepts that I had no prior knowledge to. So it's fascinating for me as well, because it's this particular way in which my guides are trying to deliver the information. So not only does it make sense to me, but then I can deliver it in a way that makes sense to the client.
Well, I think it made a lot more sense to the client than it did to me, to be fair. So I'm going to ask you a few questions about what just unfolded. Unfolded was not an intentional pun, considering that we were just talking about folding over timelines.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So, okay, let's dive right into this mystery of a subject matter, please.
Sure.
You did a pretty good job of explaining what the folding over of a timeline looks like, and I can picture it in my mind. But conceptually, why is this happening and how is this happening is certainly not something that I can get my brain around. Can you help me out?
Yeah. Parallel timelines happen all the time. You and I had a brief conversation the other night about string theory and about quantum physics and how there is no time.
None of which I understood. Let that be said.
And actually one of the things that we were saying is that maybe we can channel something from the guides that will help us understand a little bit further.
Exactly. Quantum theory for 5-year-olds.
Right. The idea, though, is that all of our timelines, all of our so-called past lives are happening all simultaneously. There are parallel dimensions, parallel lives, parallel experiences. The difference is, for most of us, they don't ever cross. They don't ever bleed into each other. So the best that we can usually do is something like be in the Akashic Records and see what's happening in a previous timeline, what we consider to be a previous timeline.
Okay, so can I interrupt there?
Yes.
And can you explain why do we perceive it or consider it to be a previous timeline if it's happening simultaneously?
Well, because we are currently on this planet that is rooted in linear time. So everything that does happen on this planet is tied to time, and it is tied to linear time. So we can say that something happened in, 1988, and we know when that is, and we have a benchmark for that. We can say that something happened in the 1600s, and we know that that's a benchmark for that particular time period. So from our perspective on Earth, we know exactly how everything unfolds because of everything that has happened in our past. When you leave Earth and you're on the other side in the other realms, it's almost like you're zooming out and seeing it from a bigger picture. And if you remove time from the equation, so if you can imagine time being a piece of yarn in a sweater, and it's just unraveling everything. And then all you have left is a pile of yarn that used to be a sweater. And it's all mixed together, and each thread of yarn might be a different year or a different decade. And they're all kind of mixed together. that's basically the sort of bird's eye view of it from the other side.
Including all the different lifetimes?
Correct.
So if you were looking at Earth from a different dimension, a different place entirely, would you be seeing every single life happening simultaneously?
You would be able to tune into it like you would like a chapter in a book. You would be able to tune into a particular frequency to be able to witness something in particular based on the timeline that Earth has. The way that they're showing it to me also is like, if you've ever seen slide carousels, back in the 80s and 90s, we had these things called slides that they used to use when we would have lessons in school. They would be these little photographs, if you will, that are on a slide, and they would be in this round carousel, and each of the slides would be, you know, sort of in a circle. And then as the teacher is teaching the lesson, it would change slides. So they're all contained within the same circle, but each slide is different. And that's kind of how they're showing it to me now, which would be like each slide represents, let's say, a different timeline, a different life, a different soul, a different period of time, all of those different things. And so, but they all exist in the same place. It's whether or not you're looking at that particular one or not. So if you take that idea of everything is happening simultaneously from the perspective of being on the other side, and that what allows us to have that separation between the parallel lifetimes, the other dimensions, and that sort of thing, are our own experiences and our energy within this particular existence within Earth. Theoretically, we shouldn't be able to access the other dimensions, the other timelines, all of that, right? But we all know that that's possible and that we've done it. So there are portals that other energies can access our dimension and we can access theirs. The most common thing that people understand and know about is people often will say, oh, at the solstice, you know, the veil is thin. And what they mean by the veil is thin is that you can see to the other side much more readily than on a normal everyday energy day based on, you know, astrology, solar placement, that type of thing. Yes. When we are looking at other dimensions and other lifetimes, we are observing. We're not tearing a hole into that dimension and literally walking to that other dimension. We're not like actually living and existing in that other dimension as us, as our human self right now. Now, our soul could be doing all kinds of things, but I'm talking about our human bodies. Okay. So for April, what was happening with her is that when she was messing with all the dimensions and creating this schism between her current timeline and the other timeline that was folded.
You're talking about her in a past life there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, she ripped a hole in that. And the energy from that other dimension, that other timeline, the parallel life, the energy was basically seeping through that hole. And then when that happens, it creates discord between both sets of her in that previous lifetime.
Why?
Because we're not meant to feel the energy and absorb the energy of that other dimension. And I don't know the answer to why. I can ask. It really has nothing to do with the energy specifically, because the two lifetimes she was dealing with were not altogether very different from each other on an energetic level. What this has to do with more is the law that the universe operates by. There are laws of the universe that keep things from fragmenting, from descending into chaos. And while chaos is not anything that is judged, there's plenty of chaos in the universe. There are certain elements of chaos that need to be held at bay for the purposes of the grand experiments that happen on various planets. And by experiments, we talk about souls experiencing various different things to learn as you do on this planet. And in order for you to have the experiences that you want to have on this planet as souls, it is necessary for those parallel versions of yourselves to not be fully accessible on a physical and energetic level. You can know what is happening in past lives, if it is meant for you, if it is something that will benefit you. But there are plenty of lives that we will not show you. For example, both you and Julia have had hundreds of thousands of lives, if not millions of lives. There are many lifetimes we will not show you. In the grand scheme of things, you have seen likely about 0.01% of all of the lifetimes you've ever lived. And there's a reason for that. There are certain things that you are not meant to know. There are certain things you're not meant to experience, and there's certain energy that you cannot handle right now in your physical bodies. So the energy that she was tapping into was in fact ripping a hole into the membrane, if you will, that separates the two lifetimes, the two parallel lifetimes. And so the energy that was being exchanged between the two was creating discord because she can't decipher between one life or the next. She feels like she's living one life, but then she realizes that she's living another. That is something that can create a feeling of chaos within her. That's why we mentioned during the session that it could actually present itself and look like schizophrenia. Because you don't know who you are, you don't know where you are, you don't know what dimension you're in, you don't know what's happening. There is something that has been happening more recently, more often. Many of you may have heard of time slipping. Annette has experienced this several times in the last several years. As we merge timelines, as we jump timelines into higher timelines, things change and shift very, very rapidly. And especially this year, they're going to be changing even more rapidly than ever before. And because of this, things may not be as you once remembered them to be. You thought that one thing was somewhere in your apartment and all of a sudden it's gone, and you knew that it was in one place and it's no longer there. If you remember the scene in The Matrix where the black cat walks by and then walks by again, they call that the glitch in the Matrix. It's similar to that. It's not a glitch, so to speak, but it is literally a merging of timelines where one of your parallel lifetimes was slightly different than the one that you're on. The timelines merge together because you are ready for those energies to merge together, because the energies are an exact match. And when they are an exact match, you can merge them together to then have one greater, higher timeline. It just so happens that there could be slightly different things in those timelines. For example, having one type of plant in your apartment, but let's say in the other timeline, it was a different plant. People have noticed these types of things happen already. There are several examples of it. And it's nothing to be worried about. It's nothing to actually even pay attention to, quite frankly, because it has no effect on your experience. People like to acknowledge it because it's interesting proof of what happens when time slips. This is the explanation regarding parallel lives, parallel timelines. They are synonymous. You can use either term interchangeably. There are things that happen within timelines that are important for you to know. Timelines are always racing to get to the highest timeline. And by this we mean you're trying to access the best, most efficient way to accomplish your soul purpose or your life purpose. And with the incredible growth on this planet energetically, this is happening at a much more rapid pace and much more frequently. Therefore, it's becoming much more noticeable. It wasn't noticeable as much before now, but now it is. So when you imagine that you have 2 or 3 different choices in your life, let's say you were choosing between staying in a place or moving, and you want to move to 2 different places, your soul will move forward in the timeline and go and live out that timeline and report back to you what the outcome of that timeline was. And then you will get the intuition that either that particular timeline was aligned for you or not. Oftentimes when we listen to our intuition, this is exactly what is happening. It is simply our higher self that is going and playing out all the various different timelines and coming back and reporting to you that one is better than the other. Okay, is there anything else? No, not at this time. Okay. Did that make any sense at all?
At all, yes. It made some sense. I think it was really cool that they addressed this jumping forward in our own timelines thing, because that's something that had come up in the session with April. And that's something that I wanted to ask you about as well.
There is an episode that I did on the podcast a little while back called Timelines. that I sort of addressed this, but I'm glad that the channel addressed it as well, because I think it explained it in a slightly different way than I had explained it before in the last channel.
They said that parallel lives and parallel timelines is the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But are we talking about the simultaneous lives we are living as different people that we also refer to as past lives?
That's a good question. Is there a distinction in that? No. Okay. There's no distinction.
But how can then be no distinction? Because when we're talking about a past life, when we were somebody completely different versus these parallel lives that we are living that are almost identical with the exception of a different plant.
Mm-hmm. Because it's the same soul. You know, our human avatars are just our human avatars. So it's like, it's still the same soul regardless. The way they're showing it to me now, I wish I could like draw something and like show it to the people on the podcast, because like the way they're showing it to me is like one line going forward that branches off into 7 lines, that goes back into 1 line, that branches off into 7 lines or 8 lines, and then goes back into 1. And so it's like this ebb and flow of merging timelines, expanding timelines, merging timelines, expanding timelines. It's a constant ebb and flow, almost like a heartbeat. Here's where it's going to get super mind-bendy. So that previous version of yourself, as they were living out their, what we would consider previous life, they probably had multiple timelines that they were living simultaneously to actually put their feelers out to see what was the greatest timeline for them, and then came back. The difference is, in previous less evolved versions of ourselves, we may not have gotten the intuition that this is the better timeline. We may have picked just some random timeline and gone with it, and that may have been one of the timelines that was detrimental. So if you can imagine, every single version of us, every single past life version of us also has parallel life versions of themselves. So it's like the short-term and long-term parallel life versions of ourselves.
What do you mean by short-term and long-term?
Well, because the parallel versions of ourselves right now are only projecting so far into the future to see what is the best timeline for us. So let's say for now, my parallel lives are only going, let's say 10 years in the future, because maybe there's some choice points in there or some destiny points that could potentially change what the outcome of that is. So our parallel life versions of ourselves are going out as far as they need to go in order to get as much information as we can for this present moment.
So if there were 2 versions of you living out 2 completely different timelines, surely you wouldn't be living the exact same life with just one different plant.
No, of course not. The differences, though, are... Okay, let me see if there's a good way to explain this.
For 5-year-olds, please.
I'm trying to use an example in my head of, like, let's say if I would have the 3 timelines. What if I would have gone to Los Angeles? What if I would have stayed in Chicago? What if I would have moved here? So those 3 options, I'm trying to see, like... Those 3 examples are... It's a good example, but they are extreme examples. So for the 3 timelines you're talking about, ultimately what will happen is that once you make a decision, the other 2 timelines completely collapse. It's not that you would merge with those timelines. The timelines that you merge with are the timelines that are actually the higher timelines. So there is another version of yourself in the future who has learned how to channel more efficiently or more effectively. There is a version of you in the future who has learned light language. And while you have not learned light language yet, you can merge with that version of yourself when the alignment is correct, when the energy is correct, and that timeline will become a reality. So in other words, when you merge timelines, you are rising up to a particular timeline that is already being played out, where you already embrace and have the skills that you already want. You already have the abundance you want. You already have the significant other that you want. When you are able to raise your vibration to that particular frequency of being able to receive that, that is when those timelines merge. So it is slightly different than the example that you just gave of moving to 3 different cities. because those are not necessarily all high timelines for you. The only timeline that would have been better for you would have been to stay in Chicago 6 months more and then chosen another place to live other than Paris, which you never got to that particular option. Therefore, moving to Paris became your highest timeline. That other option that you are looking for at this moment is the higher timeline that you will be merging with in the next year. The higher timeline is what you have been wanting. The highest timeline is what you have been looking forward to. And it's because of the fact that you know that this is what you have been guided to. Even though you may not know where that is right now. You have been feeling it. You've been talking about it. You've been talking about being near the ocean, being in the sun, being in warmth. And this is your highest timeline. So once you actually merge with that version of yourself that's already living out that life in that other place, that is when you will merge those timelines. Now, the reason why a small thing like a plant might be different or something else might be different is that, in fact, because they are higher timelines, you are living out quite a similar existence, quite a similar life, but there will be slight differences. We used a plant as an example, but it could really be anything. So your higher timelines are going to be closer to what you're already living now if you're in the energy of your ascension, if you're on your spiritual path, which everyone who would be listening to this podcast is already on their spiritual path. So their higher timelines are always going to be lived out, and they are always going to be seeking those higher timelines.
Well, we got a little prediction for you there, didn't we?
Guess so.
Do they want to whisper to me where your next timeline's going to take you, since you can't know?
Is it that I can't know? Yes. Damn it.
Can I know?
Can Julia know? No.
You guys are no fun.
Seriously. Well, the thing is that what they're just showing me now too is that the reason why I can't know is because if I knew now, I'd just pick up and move.
You'd move now.
I'd just go now. And it's not time yet. Because they're showing me like two cars merging into the same lane. You know, if you're going on a highway, you merge by slowly making sure that you're not going to hit somebody, you know? So like this would be like me trying to merge into really dense traffic and trying to force my way in.
Like there's no room for you there yet.
Right.
Like energetically.
Right. And it's so funny because that answers, I know, one of the upcoming questions that you had, which is
why can't we know?
Why can't we know? Why can't we know certain things? And that's actually why. That's not the only reason why. A majority of the time that they tell me that they can't answer something or they don't want to tell a client something, it is because by knowing that information, they will potentially muck up the timeline. We're only meant to know things when we're meant to know them. That's why when they were saying that we've only been shown certain lifetimes in the Akashic records, it's because those are the lifetimes that are going to help us. They're not going to show us a bunch of lifetimes that either won't help us or that could potentially hinder us.
I don't know where to go to next because my brain is
exploding.
A pile of mush.
So
okay. So here's a question. They said that you had experienced
time slipping.
Mm. Okay. So since you've experienced it, then you'd be able to give us some examples.
Mm-hmm. It happened to me when I first moved here. And this is actually a really, really good example of what they're talking about, like the different timelines and how the different timelines were collapsing, because it was just after I moved here and I was walking down Rue Cherche Midi. It's a lovely street. It's got a really awesome crystal shop and some other beautiful like restaurants and all kinds of beautiful shops. And I was just walking down the street. The sun was really bright. And for a split second, I was completely disoriented. I had no idea where I was. And then for a second, I was on this street in Chicago called Lincoln Avenue, which looked very similar to Rue Cherche Midi, but it was very clearly Chicago. I've been on this street a million times. We used to go play pool at this bar there like every Monday night. And so like, it wasn't a vision. I was there. Like the buildings changed, everything changed around me. It was a split second. It wasn't long at all. It was just long enough for me to see it. And I was like, whoa, what was that? And it wasn't until probably a good 1.5 to 2 years later that I found out what exactly that was. But it kind of freaked me out. I was like, am I losing it? So that's probably the most prominent one that I've experienced. So what I feel like that was possibly a parallel version of myself who had either stayed in Chicago or I was accessing a previous version of myself who was still in Chicago. That's the other thing that can happen too, is that like we can access those previous versions of ourselves. So I could have been the version of myself walking along the street in Paris, giving myself the intuition to move to Paris while I was walking down the street in Chicago. So our timelines were merging and we were able to communicate in that 1 second.
That's so cool. That's some sci-fi plot stuff, right?
Totally.
Like,
and that's the whole thing about talking about this, is that there is so much. There's so much to talk about when it comes to parallel dimensions, other dimensions, timelines, all of this. It can be mind destroying. And I can't say that I fully understand all of it even, but I understand what I've been shown, what I've channeled, what I've seen, what I've experienced. And that's basically all I can speak from, is from my own experience.
Does that also relate to just getting those little signs in life that you're on the right track? You know what I'm talking about, right?
I do.
We've talked about this before. It's not necessarily a sign that tells you to do something or gives you any indication, but it's just a sign that you're in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. So signs are a whole other topic. It just depends. So I'll refer to a recent client that was asking about some signs that they had received. And I really checked in and saw that it wasn't his angels or guides or anyone. It was actually from his ex-girlfriend. So her higher self was actually sending him the signs. And actually, in fact, she sent me a bunch of signs too, because she wanted to make sure that I was giving him a message. It really just depends. Like, signs can come from other people. Signs can come from our guides. They can come from the universe. They can come from our angels. They can come from a parallel version of ourselves, a different version of ourselves. Like, it can come from a lot of different places. The thing that they're showing me now, though, is that the parallel life version of ourselves giving us signs is much more difficult, because of the fact that, as we were talking about with April in this session, like, you can't affect the energy in the other dimensions or timelines. You can't very easily deliver those messages as we can here. Delivering a message to you, if my higher self really wanted to send you a sign, it would find a way to send you a sign. It would be relatively simple, especially given the fact that it would just be a chihuahua. But like,
I'm a simple creature.
But basically, what would happen is that if a parallel dimension version of yourself was trying to deliver a sign or a message, there would be ways to do it. But it would be like one of those things where it would have to choose the right moment. So like when the veil was thin, or, when something was going on where it would be easy to just kind of push it through, versus tearing a hole in the timeline like it did for April.
Okay, let's just pop back to the folding over of timelines that April was experiencing. Is the entirety of that line still her current lifetime, or is this bleeding into past and future lifetimes?
So with April, we didn't look too far into the previous lifetime and how exactly it was affecting her, other than what we talked about, right? We talked about how it was affecting her physically and affecting her experiences and that sort of thing. But what we haven't really talked about is that when that timeline is folded over, there comes a point on your forward trajectory that you surpass it. You surpass that period of time that has been folded over. If you think about it in terms of like a speed bump, you're going along your path in this crazy frenetic energy that you don't understand why it's happening. And if you just continue to live and move forward in it, it will eventually dissipate. That energy will eventually dissipate because that's its natural state. It wants to be back to its original state, not folded over the way that it is. So it's like she was folding dimensions as an experiment. So she was forcing it to happen, which it's not its natural state. So to be able to allow it to just go back to where it was, that's essentially what she's doing in this lifetime. But in the meantime, she's sort of living some of the consequences of that. And she has been for several lifetimes. What I'm seeing right now is that after this lifetime for her, they're showing me it will be complete and that folding over of the timeline will be done. The reason why this is not particularly important, though, is because this is such a rare occurrence. This is pretty much a unique case basis. It's not to say that it hasn't happened before, but it's pretty rare.
Okay, let me ask you one more question that's going to probe this theory.
Okay.
So we're talking before about higher beings being able to look down upon Earth and see all the different timelines simultaneously, right? Mm-hmm. So when a soul crosses over and then is on the other side trying to figure out when to come back, how to come back, what they're going to do when they come back. So obviously that soul is not currently living one of those timelines because they're over there.
But that soul is living all of the timelines because it's over there. When you're in soul form, you have access to every existence you have ever had.
But you just pop in there.
Not in a human body, but you have access to it in your consciousness. But the problem with what is happening with the folded over timelines, it doesn't have to do with the soul. It has to do with the soul within the body and the body being able to handle accessing all of those other energies. So if our bodies were equipped to handle embodying the consciousness of every person we have ever been over the course of our soul's existence, then we would do that by now. But when you talk about the ascension process and how the energies get higher and higher and higher, right? When we cross over, our energy is at a really high level. Angels are at a higher level. Ascended masters, higher level. They can see, experience, and feel everything that they've ever done as a soul. And it's all simultaneous. There's no linear experience of that. It's just all in one ball of energy, if you will.
One soup.
Yes. The experience of the folding over of timelines is embedded in the experience of the human. This goes the same for psychic debris. It goes the same for trauma, for anything that we experience as a human. And I've often described it as putting on your coat of trauma or your giant coat of humanness, right? Where when you're in the other dimensions, when you're just a soul without a body, you don't have any of that heaviness. But as you dive down into this dimension, into Earth, you have to pick up sort of where you left off on this planet. So as you pick up where you left off, you have to pick up the coat that you had before. You have to pick up the armor that you had before. You have to pick up the messed up timeline that you had before. You have to pick up all of that stuff and you have to put it back on and be like, all right, I'm back. Got to deal with this again. All right, let's go learn. Yay. So from that perspective, the folding over the timeline for her is really only having an effect on her human experience. It's not having an effect on her soul, so to speak. Does that answer the question?
It answers something. But I guess what I was trying to get to is the fact that if we are living all the lives simultaneously, but our higher self is at the same time disembodied and figuring out which next life it's going into. Mm-hmm. So that's happening simultaneously as well.
Mm-hmm. So the piece that's missing here from this equation is the fact that when we are on the other side, our soul can be everywhere all at once. Our souls are infinite. Our souls can be simultaneously in many different places all at once, right?
Yes, that piece of the puzzle was missing. All right. A little bit later in the session with April, when you were talking about her potential future life partner, you mentioned that one of the reasons that we are not supposed to know anything about, who they are and when we'll meet them is because it would, I think you said something like it would make us crazy if we could see or if we knew how it was all orchestrated.
So the reason why we're not meant to know, and especially in a particular situation where it's something is destined to happen, is because it can, in fact, make us crazy. I am living proof of that in the sense that I knew the second I met my divine counterpart, I knew that we were going to be together. Just knew it.
That's your twin flame, right?
Yes. When reality was not reflecting that back at me, I was like, but wait, that's not real. We're supposed to be together, So it's like I was operating from the standpoint of understanding and knowing that we were going to be together. And then I was trying to force it. I was trying to make it happen. And the thing is that I had no idea when that was going to happen. And at the time, I was severely in my wounding. And because this is a twin flame journey, that whole situation was absolutely there to spark my spiritual awakening. It actually put me on the path that I'm on. And, the rest is history. If you want to hear the whole story or a lot of the story, you can go back to some of the episodes because I talk about it. But it's very much about not making yourself stuck based on what you intuit or basically what you know to be true. Would I have been able to learn some of my lessons faster had I not been holding on to this idea that I was going to be with this person? Maybe. Maybe I would have. But things happened the way that they happened. And I got to a place where I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll definitely be together in this lifetime at some point. I don't know. We could be 80. I don't know. And if that's the case, all right, cool. So I'm going to be enjoying my journey until then. The thing is that when you find out these things, it can definitely be a hindrance because had I not known, had I not gotten that intuition, that strong intuition, and for the record, I did not ask about that initially. The universe was hitting me over the head with signs and I basically was trying to ignore them. And because I didn't want to be with this person. I was like, this person is not nice to me. When the universe is like, nope, pay attention to your wounding, pay attention to why are you feeling this way, So it was basically kept on redirecting me to why I was running away. What was I running away from? Turns out I was just running away from myself. But all of this can really leave you in a place of feeling like something is wrong, like you're a victim of some sort, that like, oh, I know this to be true, but why isn't this happening? If I hadn't known, would I have just moved on and just started dating other people and doing other things, which, I did do for a time, but ultimately the experiences that I needed were the experiences I needed. So whether I got those experiences from him or from other people, I was going to get those experiences regardless. So that part doesn't really matter. But to know exactly how everything was going to unfold, if I would have known at that moment. So 2 years, you're going to be the lowest you've ever been. You're going to be crying every day. You're going to be at the worst part of your life that you've had in a long time. Then you're going to come out of it and then you're going to feel much better. And then you're going to move to Paris and then you're going to become this spiritual healer and you're going to start reading the Akashic records. And then you're going to move to some beachy place, which I don't even know. And you're going to be super happy there and you're going to meet somebody who's going to be lovely. And it may or may not be your twin flame. If I would have known all of this, would it actually happen? Maybe not, because then I would be like, oh, okay, so I need to move to a beachy place. Cool, let's just skip over the whole thing and let's just do that now. And then what would happen? I would expect there to be my divine counterpart. I'd expect there to be my channeling to come in or that Akashic records would come in and all this other stuff. I'd expect all this stuff and I'd be waiting for it going, where is it? And it wouldn't be there because it's not the right time. Again, it's about that merging. So for those of you out there, including myself.
Yes, because listen to your own advice.
I don't do that sometimes. For those of you out there, including us, who really want to know what the future holds, just know that if there's something that the universe wants you to know, and there's something that your higher self wants you to know, that there's a version of yourself that has gone into a higher timeline and wants to tell you about it, they will tell you about it. You will get the information, I promise you. Especially given the fact that you're all intuitive beings. You will get the information, you will not miss it. And if you do miss it, there will be many other chances for you to get it again. I have to remind myself of that. So while we're editing this episode, I'm going to listen to this again and I'm going to tell myself, yeah, Annette, listen to that. Listen to her.
Listen to this smart woman. She knows what she's talking about.
So, yeah.
That is a great little segue to finish off on the subject matter of trust and of signs, because that's what you finished the session with April. You reminded her this exact thing, that she needs to trust and follow the signs.
I'm shaking my head right now because it's just funny. I really should listen to the things that I say.
Maybe you'll start now that you're going to be playing them back to yourself.
No kidding. Well, I mean, so everybody, I mentioned this many, many times. I usually forget the channels and forget the sessions very quickly after they close. So when I go back and listen to them again, I am hearing new things that maybe I haven't heard before, or things that I have heard before, but I've forgotten. So it's a good reminder for myself as well. The trusting of the signs. There have been times where I have yelled at my guides because I don't understand a sign that they're giving me. So they've given me signs sometimes where it's like just constant over and over and over again. And I'm like, why? I don't understand that sign. Please give me another sign because I don't understand it. You keep on giving it to me and I have no idea what it means. And eventually I figure it out. Eventually I do. But the really cool thing about it is that most of the time, our higher self, our guides, all of our teams on the other side, they give us plenty of time because they know we are slow. We do not pick up on things very quickly. So they give us plenty of time. This is another thing that I want to also instill upon people is that it is very rare that the guides will give you something that you have to take action on immediately. The only time that really happens is if they've been constantly giving you signs and you just haven't been paying attention. That can sometimes happen, and then they'll give you some little 911 signs and they'll be like, hey, you need to take care of this now.
But then it's going to come with like flashing lights.
Yeah, it does. There was a time when I was getting signs about my birthday a long time ago. I had been seeing my birthday everywhere. And I was like, God, that's really weird. And I was like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen to my birthday, And then I literally saw it in my dream in brass glowing letters. And I was like, whoa, okay. Well, clearly they're really trying to get my attention on this. I really didn't get the message. And I didn't. And what I had experienced was less than pleasant. But, I got through it eventually and it was fine. But like the thing is that, there are times when we just don't get it. And that's fine. We just end up going through whatever we have to go through. We just have to make it through. It is very much about connecting to your intuition, asking your guides, okay, what is this sign about? Is this something that I need to take action on? Is this something that you're just giving me as encouragement? Am I going in the wrong direction? Is this a course correction? Like really kind of investigating and asking those questions. And if you don't understand a sign, ask your guides to give you a different one. Just say, you know what? I don't understand what you're giving me. Just give me a different sign. And they will. And, you just have to sort of help them with whatever sign you want them to give you, and they'll do it for you. The letting go and trusting that things will work out the way that they are meant to and the way that they're going to. It's one of those things where you have to work at it every day. Just the letting go of the fear, letting go of the worry, letting go of the anxiety, letting go of the, can I know yet? Can I know yet? Can I know yet? I can tell you that I've been asking every day about where is this beach place that I'm going to be living? Because I really don't know. So to just be open and let go and allow your life to unfold and trust that your higher self has totally got your back. It's going down those timelines and reporting back to you and letting you know when things are not great, when you need to course correct. Your spirit team is there for you. Everyone is there for you. Your crossed over loved ones are there for you, cheering you on and probably smacking their foreheads going, no,
wrong way, go back.
So yeah, it's a process. So I can't say that there's any magic way of just trusting and believing and knowing, but allowing is the best way that I can describe it, is just to allow.
That's what I was going to say, that it's a bit of a muscle, the trust thing. Mm-hmm. There's no magical way to just click your fingers and just, suddenly trust. Mm-hmm. But it's like bit by bit as things unfold, and as maybe you see a sign and then maybe you see the consequence of it, and then maybe you survive something else, and then something else unfolds in a particularly interesting way that puts something else in perspective and makes sense. And it's like retrospectively, you connect the dots. Yeah. And then as you kind of start seeing those patterns play out in your life, slowly that trust builds.
And that's exactly what the guides do on your spiritual journey. You're exactly right. They will sort of build up your confidence by these little tiny ways
over the course of time. And that's how I got to where I am, because had I not gotten those small little proof points along the way, I don't think I would have made it to where I am.
Proof in your capabilities, you mean?
No, just proof in the signs, proof in, like, because that's actually how it started building my faith, was getting signs of something, being guided to something, doing it, having it work out. All right, so that worked out. That was correct. That was right. Okay, cool. So, all right, so the next little thing, and it's always the little things first, because we want to be correct about the signs about the big things, but the big things take a little bit longer to come into your experience. So you might be waiting several years, before you see proof of something like that. So it's always best, if you're you work with your guides and your spirit team and your higher self, start small. Start with small things. I'm trying to think of a really good example of that. Do you have a good example of that? One that you've experienced?
I don't know. I can only just think of like really mundane things, like, if you have a free day and you just, deciding what you want to do that day, and you have, 20 different options of what you could do. And then you kind of feel into what you feel like doing, and then you go and do that thing. And then you like come upon some really cool event, or, you cross paths with someone, or something really like cool and interesting happens within the course of an otherwise completely mundane day. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. That's why I made this decision to come to this place and do this thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like little things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the bigger things that happened for me that was just like the glaring neon sign was, I was in Michigan visiting my father. This was years ago, because he was feeling really down. He had had some really bad health problems and things like that. So I was visiting him, and then I decided to go out to lunch with my mom. While we were at lunch, we got a phone call from my aunt saying that my cousin had had a heart attack. And within, I think, about an hour or so, he had died. Of course, I called my father and said, hey, I'm going to go with my mom over to where my aunt was at the hospital. So we go to the hospital, and they're all talking about organ donation. My dad needed a kidney. That's why I was there, is to, just sort of help support him emotionally, because he was really upset about the fact that he needed a kidney. He would have had to wait years to get this kidney. And so they're talking about organ donation. And I just stopped, and I was like, I know this is really rude to ask, but my dad needs a kidney. And my aunt was like, of course, Annette, of course. To give context, my parents divorced when I was 2. And so the two sides of the family don't communicate. It's not that they have animosity, they just don't communicate. So had I not been there that weekend, there may have been nobody sitting at that table advocating for my father. So within 2 days, they had the kidney tested. And keep in mind, this is not blood relation. The kidney was a 100% match. Within 2 days, my dad was in the ER getting the kidney transplant from my cousin who had just died.
I'm not sure that counts as a little thing. I thought that's what we were discussing, like little low-key examples. You can't ask me for something little and then just like come out with a story like that. That's not fair. That's not playing by the rules of the game.
Well, I did say this was the big neon sign. Okay. So that was the big neon sign. The thing is that in that whole orchestration, there was nothing that I needed to do. I literally just followed my intuition. There were no signs that I needed to follow. I just kind of followed what felt good, what I felt like I wanted to do. And that's how it all unfolded. And my father, who was a self-proclaimed atheist, I said to him as he's laying in the hospital, I was like, you cannot deny anymore. You cannot deny that there is some sort of orchestration here. And he goes, I don't know, it's just a big coincidence. And I was like, Dad, come on. So that, like, things like that would happen that would actually, I mean, you can't deny the timing and the orchestration of things like that. So now that I have overstepped my small example, I couldn't think of a small example. I know I've had a lot of small examples, but like, yeah, I can't think of any right now. But what is one of your big examples?
Well, I can't beat yours either. So either way, I lose. I don't think I'll be able to think of one off the top of my head anyway.
That's
so,
okay.
No, just as well. But I think, I definitely don't have one like that in my experience, but that's also not necessary. Just an accumulation of small ones is enough to build the trust.
Well, that might just prove that you have way more trust than I do. I think they needed to like hit me over the head with a freaking hammer. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Well, but I didn't used to, that's a fairly recent development, I would say. And that's purely a result of watching these things come to fruition slowly, little bit by bit.
Mm-hmm.
But there was definitely a period in my life where that wasn't happening. That wasn't the case.
Yeah.
And that was a period in my life where I just felt like really quite alone and abandoned and forgotten by the entire universe. And, when you're in that kind of state, it's very hard to have any kind of faith. Even the small signs are not very meaningful.
And you bring up a really good point too, because I went through several bouts of that. And I know a lot of other people have as well, which is you go through these periods of time where you get tons and tons of signs. You get all the signs and you get all the synchronicities. And, like you were saying, you decide to follow an intuition to go on a beautiful outing for a day and it just turns into something magical and all of that. And so you have all of those things. And then at some point, all the signs just kind of stop. And this happens for everyone. And when the signs started stopping, I was like, oh my God, I'm on my own. How do I navigate this on my own? What do I do? The best piece of advice I can give people is that once you stop getting the signs, usually that means that either you've reached a level of trust and understanding to the point where you may not need them anymore, or you're already on your path and you're on the right path and you don't need them. But it's the ego that is looking for them and saying, but no, I still need more proof. I still need more proof. When in fact, the universe is like, nope, sorry, training wheels are off. You're good. You're like, but wait, I don't know how to skate. They're like, doesn't matter.
It's true. I'm nodding because I know exactly what you're talking about. I had that happen to me like not that long ago, actually. This like the disappearance, not the first original absence of signs, but then it's kind of like after the fact and after you kind of get used to them being present and to having all of this, synchronicities and sense of direction and all of that. And then like, boom, it all just kind of goes away. And for me, that like it lasted for quite a few months. And I remember actually talking to you about it and you told me very much the same thing. It's a period of testing your trust as well. Mm-hmm. It's like now you've learned to trust with all of that stuff. Now let's see if you really, really trust. It's a little bit of that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I vividly remember that sense. And it's kind of scary. You're in the void. You're like flying blind and where's all my senses? Where's all my signs? Where's everything? But eventually it's sort of, as you also told me, it does come back, but it just comes back in a quieter way.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing is that we're slowly being shown how to be in the void. Because actually being in the void is exactly where we need to be. And accepting and understanding where we are in the present moment and really trusting that what you have laid out before you is exactly where you need to be. And there's nothing to worry about, even if you have 5 or 100 timelines that are being played out right now. Just know and trust that your higher self has it all under control and that you will get the messages when you need to get them. And then your spirit team, everybody else is still there for you. But yes, it can feel very isolating when you get that first initial and even the subsequent ones where you feel like you're being abandoned and it feels like nobody's there for you anymore, right? And like none of your spirit team is there for you anymore. But I promise you, they don't go anywhere, especially if it's your spirit team. They don't have any other jobs to do. Okay, they're saying to me, that's not true. We do have other jobs. Okay. Let me correct myself. Yes, they do have other jobs to do, but they can be everywhere all at once. So, they can do simultaneous things.
Very highly efficient beings.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, I trust that some of this episode will make some sense.
I don't know if it will. I'm sitting here going, oh my God, was that all just like dribble? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I do have to say that like, there are probably a million scientists out there that could describe quantum physics and string theory better than I can.
Yeah, but I've tried to listening to a whole bunch of them and it just doesn't land. So
Yeah.
I don't think that the scientific explanation works for me.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that the scientific explanation doesn't take into consideration the spiritual explanation as well. So it's like you got to kind of mold those two together in order to get like what's really happening. And even then, our rudimentary, mushy brains that we have are trying to compute these concepts that our guides are like, it's okay. You'll understand when you cross over. Okula, my Akashic guide, he's always trying to deliver information to me that will make sense. But sometimes there's just no way to explain it the way that our brains will understand, because our brains will never understand until we get to that place where we merge onto that timeline, and who knows when that will be.
It's taking me back to Jerry from Soul.
Yes.
I can't remember the exact quote, but the multidimensional being, but your brains can only comprehend it as Jerry or something like that.
That's right. Oh my God, I love that. It's so good. Oh, such a good movie.
On that note.
Yes.
Great chat today.
Thanks, Julia.
I thoroughly enjoyed it, as always.
Me too.
If you would like to get in touch with either Julia or myself, feel free to head to my website at infinitesoullove.com. You can also follow me on all social media at infinitesoullove1111. And that is on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Thanks so much, and see you next week.